So hi everyone, welcome to today's panel conversation with club leaders getting involved in the school student groups. This event is part of the University of Toronto Engineering Academy, and it is one of a number of events and workshops that the Truce Institute for Leadership Education in Engineering, better known as Truce ILead, is offering to students in this program. Today we have a panel of 5 student leaders from different student groups and organizations at U of T Engineering. They come from design teams, social impact groups, student governments, and more. And they will share their experience as student leaders and address questions like how to get involved and what leadership means to them. I want to start today's event with a land acknowledgement to honor and express gratitude to those who reside here. So we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to the many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I recognize that folks on this call are joining from all over the world, and so I encourage you to reflect on and give appreciation and gratitude to those whose territory you reside on. And we'll post a link in the chat so you can learn more about the territory you reside on. So before we get into the panel, I want to introduce the Truce ILead and the Truce ILead team that is here today. So my name is Teresa Didiano, and I'm the Graduate Professional Development Coordinator at Truce ILead. I oversee professional and leadership development initiatives for our engineering graduate students, but I've also been involved with the University of Toronto Engineering Academy, and I'm really excited to be here today to introduce today's event. And I'll pass it over to Albert.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Albert Quinn. I am also a staff member at Truce ILead. I work in student programs, developing workshops and courses for all students at the undergraduate and graduate level in our faculty. And as a fun fact, I'm also an alumnus of U of T Engineering. I went from track 1 into chemical engineering and did some grad work in industrial engineering. So I'm very happy to be here with you all today.
And then Jordan, if you want to go next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Danielle. I work at Truce ILead with our wonderful team, including Teresa and Albert. I'm a leadership education specialist and involved in a lot of the co-curricular programs or kind of extracurricular programs that ILead runs, especially relevant today, are programs targeted at club leaders and clubs. One of which is our summer fellowship program, where all of our panelists are coming from. So the summer fellowship program is a program that we created to really engage some of the most highly committed club leaders within engineering community at U of T. And the program brings them together in a community over the entire summer. And they meet weekly. Obviously, during the pandemic, we're meeting over Zoom. And the group supports each other in making positive changes within their club to kind of improve the organizational structure or the coordination between different parts of their club or whatever challenges that they might be facing. So the club's community is actually extremely vibrant in the University of Toronto Engineering. There's usually over 100 different clubs. And so it can be pretty overwhelming for incoming students and even students in their second and third year sometimes to figure out how they want to get involved. So that's some of the reason why we brought together some club leaders from the summer fellowship program to talk to you today. So they can provide some more insight into getting involved in clubs. And ILead as a whole, we are very much a fan of promoting student involvement in the clubs for many, many reasons. It's a great place to meet new friends. It's a great place to build your skills, professional and technical skills, and to just have a more kind of well-rounded experience at university, where U of T is going to equip you with the academics and the technical knowledge pretty well, but the clubs will give you kind of a wider set of experiences and network to work with. So we really encourage you to participate in those clubs, and which is why we are hosting this panel today with some of our summer fellows.
So maybe, Albert, if you can go back a couple slides, we'll kind of do a quick introduction. Jordan gave us a broad introduction to ILead, and we'll kind of dive in a little bit deeper before we begin today's panel. And so what is ILead? So ILead is an institute within the Faculty of Engineering, and we are a team of educators, researchers, and professors. And our mission is engineers leading change to build a better world. So we want to inspire the leadership potential of our engineering students. So we define leadership as everyone is a leader. It's not positional. It's a lifelong process. It's about creating positive impact on everyone around you. So what does this mean? What does this actually look like in practice? It's about taking initiative to resolve a team conflict, asking a tough question in class, or working effectively with team members on a team project. So there are numbers of ways you can get involved with ILead when the school year begins in the fall. So we offer drop-in workshops. They're 1 to 2 hours in length. We have cohort programs where you can join a community of students and take part in a multi-session leadership learning experience. We have support for leaders and student clubs, like Jordan mentioned, the Summer Fellows, as well as we have something called the Crash Course. And we offer 4 credit academic courses. And if you want to learn more about these opportunities, I encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter at the link below. So Jordan kind of introduced the panel and he introduced himself. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Jordan and he'll introduce the panelists.
All right. So we have a wonderful group of 5 panelists here representing 5 different student organizations. And what I'm going to do is just allow them to each introduce themselves. So just remember to introduce yourself, your name, your department, the year that you're going to in the fall. What's your student group that you're representing today? And then what are you mainly up to this summer? So we'll start it off with Ali Reza Rezavi from UTAT Rocketry team.
Hello, everyone. So as Jordan said, my name is Ali Reza Rezavi. I go by Ali, if that's easier to call me. I'm ENSA Aero, going into 4th year, returning from PEY. And the student group I'm part of is UTAT Rocketry, and I'm the director of UTAT Rocketry for the coming year. So this summer, with all the extra time I'm working in the carpentry shop I have, and working on that, it's a kind of a hobby, so just expanding that and working on that with the extra time.
Nice, great. Thanks, Ali. Great to hear about your carpentry in the extra time. Next, we're going to pass it off to Hanna Zhang representing Frosh Week.
Maybe just super quickly before Hannah, sorry about that. Ali, do you want to actually tell us what UTAT stands for?
Yeah, so it's the University of Toronto Aerospace Team. And basically our mission is to provide or expand the aerospace field at the undergraduate and graduate level within the university community. And we do this through providing an environment to work on challenging technical projects. We have 3 divisions. We have an unmanned aerial systems division, a satellite division, and a rocketry division, as I said. And so we work on different aerospace projects.
Great, thanks.
I will go next. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see the great turnout today. I'm Hannah. I'm an NSci TTO, which means I'll be going into my 4th year this fall. And I also did PY this summer. And I'm actually one of the vice chairs for Frosh Week, which I hope you've heard of, but if you haven't, that's totally fine. And yeah, Frosh Week's the first event of your undergraduate year, if you so choose to participate. And it's a really great time to make friends and just like get exposed to a lot of different people and like a lot of the different parts of school. Like Jordan was talking about like the diverse club landscape we have. So you'll get to engage with all of these different parts of school, meet a ton of great new people, and then really just like kick off the beginning of your university career. So I'm involved because I really think this is a great cause to be in, to welcome you guys into your big next step in life. So that's me. And I guess like for fun, I like to paint and I like to rock climb, but I can't do the other things. So I'm doing more painting these days.
Great. Great, getting involved in the arts. All right, so next we'll pass it off to Mariana Mia Kovac, who is representing the Engineering Society.
Hey, hopefully everyone can hear me. My name is Mariana. I'm an NSci 222, so I'm going into my 3rd year of engineering science in the biomed option. I am from Toronto, and NSOC stands for the Engineering Society, which is our official student government here at U of T Engineering. So anything you do within the society, you're all members of NSOC just by coming to our school. And so we provide services for you, and I'm the Vice President Academic, so I handle all the academic and faculty relations. And this summer, I haven't been going much anywhere, but I have been really working on my veggie garden in the backyard. So if this whole engineering thing doesn't work out, I'm going right into farming.
Nice. I think that's a useful skill no matter what. Okay, let's pass it off to Natalie Enrique Burch, who is representing Engineers Without Borders.
Hi everybody, my name is Natalie. I'm going into my second year of industrial engineering, and also working on minoring in Indigenous Studies and Latin American Studies. I'm very excited to be a co-president for U of T chapter of Engineers Without Borders, also known as EWB. We're a social impact organization, and our mission is to catalyze changes which address the root causes of inequity and poverty by investing in our members' ideas. And we do this in lots of different areas of impact, including sustainability and environmental justice, cyber ethics and digital rights, and all kinds of fun stuff. And this summer I've been kind of stuck inside, but I try to get out by going biking a lot. I pretty much grew up my whole life in Toronto, but I'm discovering lots of new parts of the city that I didn't know about just by getting lost on my bike. So that's been fun, and I'm grateful for that despite the pandemic.
Nice, great. Thanks, Natalie. And our last panelist is Peter De Palma, who is representing University of Toronto Super Mileage team.
Hi, everybody, and good afternoon. Like Jordan said, my name is Peter. I'm going into my third year of mechanical engineering, and so that means I'm a 2T2, and I'm here to represent the University of Toronto Super Mileage team, more commonly known as UTSM. And currently, I'm actually working full-time. I work at an architectural company, and that's why you see me wearing the mask. I'm in my office. We're trying to social distance. But I otherwise work with things like CAD and point clouds to create 3D models of buildings. But I'm otherwise super excited to be here alongside the rest of the club leaders today to share our own club experiences and also answer your questions.
Great. So thank you to all our panelists who have just introduced themselves. And now we're going to give you, our participants, a chance to introduce yourselves in some small breakout groups.
Great. So you'll see on screen here, there are some quick instructions for you. In a moment, I'm going to be placing you into some breakout groups. And once you're in there, we want you to just introduce yourself with your name, what department you're going into, where you're joining us from. Obviously, some of the stuff that you've already been putting into the chat, but just verbally for each other, so benefits. And then a little bit about, what kind of student groups you've been involved in the past, in high school or in previous scenarios, and maybe some questions that you have about student groups so that you can start thinking about what you can ask the panelists and how you want to actually engage with the rest of the session. All right, so I'm just going to post these questions into the chat for everybody's benefit as well, so you'll have those as reference for when you jump in.
Yeah, those questions are there already.
Oh, they are there already. Perfect. All right. So we're just going to give you a pretty quick amount of time, just about 5 minutes. So about a minute or a little bit more each. So don't need to take too long to introduce yourselves, but hopefully you get a sense for who's here. All right. Back, people. Just waiting for everybody to trickle on back in. Welcome, welcome. Hopefully you had a good chance to introduce yourself to some of the people that you're going to be classmates with. And also some of the people here watching the panel with us. We're just waiting for everybody to get back into the session. Okay, great. I think we are good to go.
All right. So welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a nice chance to kind of meet a couple of new people. And exchange some introductions, and also talk about some of your questions and concerns about the club space. What we want you to do is we're going to put an open invitation to use the chat for you to put any of your questions that you want to ask to the panelists kind of typed up in there. And what will happen is Albert will be monitoring these. And while we're asking some questions that we had pre-prepared, Albert will be putting together and conglomerating some of the questions that you've asked, and we'll have a good chunk of time for those to be asked at the end. So if a question pops up while the conversation is ongoing, you can feel free to put it in the chat, or a long-standing question that you've already had, you can put it in the chat right now, and we'll be monitoring those and have a chance for them to be answered at the end. All right, so please use that chat function and we'll be able to get to your questions. So we're gonna jump right in with some pre-planned questions for our panelists. And we've already heard a little bit about their clubs and their roles, but we want to dig a little bit deeper so you get a better picture of what goes on with these clubs. So in the same order that we went before, I'm gonna ask you just tell us a little bit more about your club through an example of an activity or an event that regularly happens in your club, and that's really exciting for you, and what your role is related to that event, and how kind of you contribute to that. All right, so we'll go in the same order that we did before, starting with Ali.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with a quick overview of the projects we're working on. We're working on 3 different rockets, a solid, a hybrid, and a liquid engine rocket. And so going into one specific example, let's say the hybrid rocket, we work on this. It's more of a long-term project. So if you think about like a long-term engineering project, what that would look like, that's a very similar way in which we work. And so every year we test a few launches or a few components of this rocket with some simpler launches. And our goal is to launch this record-breaking rocket in the coming summer. So what it would look like is throughout the first half of the year, you work on remaining design elements, and then the second half of the year, you build and test, and then it's a very fun trip at the end to go somewhere in a farm or a desert and launch a rocket. And that's kind of the sort of thing we do. And my role in this as director is to oversee that the project's progress. There's chief engineers and project managers that handle that in more detail, but my job is to make sure that they have the budget and facilitate the team discussions to make sure that these projects move forward, as well as facilitate any sort of external communication our team has. So that's kind of an example of what we work on and what my role would be on.
Great, thanks, Ali. A really good example of a classic and long-lasting design team at U of T. Great, Hanna.
Hi, everyone. So Frost Week is like a 1-week series of events, and an example of that is actually the first one, the kickoff to everything matriculation. In this event, you'll look to the left corner of your screen and then the right corner of your screen to your buddies, and then do the hard hat oath, you know, your yellow hard hat that came in the mail, in your yellow Frost t-shirt, and then you'll just like be exposed to a lot of the different aspects of the culture at school, different student groups, and just like feel that's a kickoff to your 4+ year university experience here. So that's an example of something that one of the events we run, but we run many events, and my role in all this is doing a lot of the scheduling and the operations of the events, the planning. Who do we need involved, volunteers? Yeah, so that's kind of like the role I play in all this.
Great. Thanks, Hanna. A great way to get involved in school right before even classes started. So Frost Week is a beautiful example of that. Mariana.
A lot of NSOC work happens behind the scenes. So for example, as first years, for a lot of your courses, you're going to have midterms and exams, and there's a place called courses.skule.ca where you can get access to past year's exams and midterms and sometimes even quizzes. And all of that comes from us at NSOC going to faculty and asking them for these exams, and they give them to us and we send them to a company to get scanned, and then I upload them and make sure that all the course information is updated. There's also a thing called the Frost Anti-Calendar where you can go on that website and figure out, it tells you like how useful the textbook is, like the overall difficulty of the course, tips and tricks from previous upper years. So all of that website is maintained by me and my portfolio. And then, you know, as a first year, let's say, for example, you have a quiz coming up and you have another quiz the next day, or there's a lot piling up in your schedule, you can talk to your class reps and they can try and resolve it within your instructors. So every year has a class rep. And if that doesn't work, myself as VP Academic, it would be my job to go and speak to either one of the vice deans or one of your division chairs and just really talk to them about what's going on and find a resolution that works for all parties. So a lot of my work is advocacy and also overseeing different little projects here and there.
Great, thanks, Mariana. NSOC has a ton of services that are often kind of underutilized or not frequently known about for students. So it's great to hear about some of those today. All right, Natalie.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier in the intro to EWB that we have different portfolios and areas of impact. So that's one way that people get involved. But another way that you can get involved with EWB, which I wanted to highlight right now, since you're all in first year, is our event called EW Bootcamp. So this is an event that we host around like the beginning of the school year, sometime in September, and it's specifically directed at first years, and it's a chance for you to get to meet some of the members of our team and see what we're all about, but also engage in a full day of learning about different social impact issues. And the reason that we have this event is because at EWB, one of our core values is to invest in our members, and we believe that investing in our community so that you feel welcome and that you have people that you can lean on is a big part of that. So this year, given the social distancing restrictions that will be in place, we're kind of reshaping EW Bootcamp so that there's a huge emphasis on also community building and friendship instead of just learning, which has been the emphasis in the past. So that's like a little bit of a sneak peek of some of the chapter-wide events that EWB hosts. But another way that people get involved in our club is through ownership of projects, which will probably come up later in this talk. So I'll save that one for later.
Great, thanks, Natalie. Yeah, it's kind of talking about investing in people. Clubs is such a great opportunity for students to get involved and learn and grow as people and as leaders, and EWB does a great job of that. All right, and Peter.
Awesome. I just wanted to really quickly explain also like the purpose of UTSM. Ultimately, UTSM's purpose is to design, build, and race highly fuel-efficient vehicles using otherwise unconventional energy methods. So some of the projects we're working on currently, similar to like Ali's with UTAB, we operate on some longer design schedules. So we have 2 projects currently going on. We have a short-term 1-year project with our prototype vehicle that runs on our completely custom internal combustion engine that runs on gas. And another project that we're also working on a 2-year cycle is a bit of a larger vehicle known as an urban concept. And this vehicle runs on a hydrogen fuel cell. And we actually race these vehicles annually at the Shell Eco Marathon. And we've been to places like Hungary. We've also been to Michigan, San Francisco, and Houston. And kind of my role in all of these projects is more formally to be the face of the team when talking to our title sponsors in the university. But kind of what I'm more interested in is being more in the service position of providing visionary leadership to my other subsystem leads and helping them ensure that they're on the right track and meeting our goals and expectations.
Great. Thanks, Peter. So UTSM, another example of a design team that's very different from UTAT. And within each of the categories of clubs, you'll find many, many different clubs that have different kind of flavors and styles and size of teams. And it's really cool to kind of find one that kind of really suits your interests and what you're looking for. So kind of speaking of the diversity of the different types of clubs, the next question I'm going to ask a few panelists is, kind of given that there are 100 student groups in U of T and just in engineering, forget like the wider U of T community, how did you go about deciding what group to join? And maybe we'll stick with Peter and we'll hear from you about your decision process quickly.
Sure. So to be very blunt, actually, what caught my interest of UTSM was when I was in first year, going to our clubs fair booth or going to the clubs fair that U of T was holding. And I noticed a bunch of Shell, so the gas company, their logos plastered all over this one booth table. And I watch Formula One and I'm interested in cars and things like that. So when I saw all that marketing, that was actually what drew me over. It was literally just, you know, the logo of one of our title sponsors. But I would say something that kept me with the team, not necessarily just intrigued me, was UTSM's ability to keep a consistent vision over a long period of time. And more importantly, actually able to explain that vision to students. So as a first year student, for me, it was very difficult to kind of understand how a project would carry over on a long term. And I'm talking, you know, months and almost years. And the leadership at our team was really clear in terms of understanding and detailing milestones and setting expectations. and provided a lot of growth, a room for personal growth and growth within the responsibilities of what you can kind of contribute to the team.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Maybe we'll hear from Natalie. What was your kind of process on how you decided to get involved?
Yeah, I think what I did was I started by identifying what I was passionate about and also what I wanted to learn more about. And for me personally, that has always been thinking about like social impact within my community and other communities. And so that's how I kind of came to the decision that I wanted to be involved in a social impact club. In terms of choosing EWB specifically, I kind of weighed my alternatives within the other social impact clubs within both U of T engineering and also outside of engineering. And I think I ultimately stuck with EWB for a variety of reasons. First, there's just so many different issues that you can look at within EWB. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 6 different portfolios and they each look at a different area of impact. So I felt that I could really find something that was specific enough for me to learn about one specific area, but also there was a lot of options for me. Another reason why I stuck with EWB was because it was well established, and so we have a really strong like internal culture at EWB, and we have a system of values which helps everyone to communicate and be on the same page. And related to that, we just have a very strong community, which is also something important for me in joining a club. I wanted an experience where I could also be developing friendships instead of just developing skills. So I think those kind of factors helped me to decide.
Great. And Mariana, what was kind of process that you used to kind of get involved in NSOC?
Well, I always knew that I really enjoyed talking to people. Like I came to university to make friends and also to meet people with different perspectives. And I found one of the ways that I could do that, and just also by going to clubs fair and asking people, was to join NSOC, just because a lot of the positions are elected, and so people have to vote for you, and so you have to get to know people. So I ran for first year chair, which is a position that you can all run for in September, where you basically get to run events for all the first years and just get to know everybody. And since then, I've just taken on more positions in NSOC, and now I'm a VP academic. So it really just started off with a desire to want to meet people, to get to know people, to hear their perspectives and their stories, and here we are today.
Great. So we heard a good variety of different reasons that people got involved, whether it might have been kind of a passion for a certain topic, an interest in a certain type of organization, meeting different ways of meeting people, or kind of building friendships and community. So yeah, really diverse set of reasons to get involved and ways to look at different clubs. So another reason to get involved in clubs is to really develop skills, and not just kind of your technical skills as well, but kind of leadership skills. So I'm going to ask the question now: what is one skill or mindset that you developed in your leadership role that has been helpful for you in your coursework or your PUI? So again, some of these skills that you developed in your club that have been useful for you outside of your club. And we'll start off with Ali.
Yeah, so I think speaking from a design team perspective, one of the most useful skills I learned was teamwork on a larger scale or on a large project that spans many months. And this is different from the scope of teamwork you would learn working on a course project with a small group that doesn't span too long of a time. This is really helpful when transitioning into a PUI role. It made it very smooth because the transition from a design team to PUI, it was just more money is involved in the projects on PUI, whereas the time scales and the nature of the work was very similar, and the size of the teams was also very similar. So that's a skill that was very helpful from the design team, was skill of working in teams, larger teams than what you usually have.
Great. Thanks, Ali. Yeah, and Albert just pointed out a good note there that PUI is professional experience year. So that's when you do your co-op term, 12 to 16 months in a company after your second or third year. Great. So let's hear from Hanna. I know you're just on or wrapping up your PUI now.
Yeah. So I think within my leadership role, I learned a lot about mentorship and then how to mentor and guide others, as well as like listening to signals from those around me about like guidance that I need to follow, and receiving mentorship as well from the leadership program, actually, which is like mentoring for leaders. And I think that this has helped me a lot in my academic and kind of like just working with other people, whether it's in PY or projects I'm working on, because I'm someone who's like very hard on myself. So sometimes when I'm working on things, I just kind of block out everyone and try and like finish it myself. But then with this new perspective, I realized that like your leader or whoever you're working with wants to help you and wants to like help you reach your goals. And I know now how to ask for that, how to communicate what I need, and just like have like better experiences through that once you get on the same level. So that's kind of how I've benefited from my leadership role.
Nice, thanks, Hanna. And Natalie, let's hear from you on this one.
Yeah, so it was hard for me to pick because I think extracurricular experiences and specifically leadership have kind of shaped me during my university career way more than I could have ever grown from like just classes. But the one I'm going to share is actually related to time management and a leadership role that I had last year in EWB as an executive member. So when I joined, it was quite difficult for me to manage my courses and my extracurriculars. And I know a lot of you have also been kind of mentioning that in the chat, and it's definitely a huge concern. And so, but because I had already taken on this responsibility, I had to figure out a way to do that. So something that I learned in order to manage my time was actually using Google Calendar, which is something that coming out of high school, I didn't really do, but it has definitely changed my life. So if you don't use calendars, I would recommend at least trying it out. That's why I really want to share this one with you. And the way I got that learning was actually from my co-executive person, like my co-exec. So they really helped me to learn and develop and grow in that way as well. So there's definitely like different pieces of learning from that experience, but I think like in terms of a tangible thing that I keep repeating, it's actually using Google Calendar to manage my time.
Great. Thanks, Natalie. So yeah, even just from 3 short stories here, we hear the diversity of skills that you can get from club experiences that can translate into any other setting. So teamwork is extremely important in engineering and outside of engineering, kind of mentorship, giving and receiving mentorship. So great point from Hanna, like learning how to ask for help is really important skill that you need in engineering. And time management also, big time crunch during engineering, and an important skill to have and be able to use those tools like Google Calendar. So speaking of time management, and this question has already came up in the chat. So again, U of T is a very rigorous academic program, and there are concerns, well, how do I balance my time between clubs and between academics? So I'm going to ask the panelists, kind of what is one strategy you would offer to incoming first-year students to be able to balance their coursework and involvement in student clubs? And I think the perfect person to start with on this one, considering she is VP academic, balancing academics and extracurriculars. Mariana, what's your piece of advice or strategy for students?
Thanks, Jordan. Question I get all the time, completely normal to ask. It really depends on what you want to get out of university. So a lot of students, like, you know, everyone here has worked really hard to get to where they are today. So congratulations if no one's told you that yet. But some people just really, they want to get their degree done and get that out of the way, and that's perfectly fine if you don't want to be involved in clubs, and that's fine. A lot of people do want to be involved in clubs, and so you do have to carve out that time in your schedule for it. And I can tell you, you will have time. Just because we're told to say there's about 55 to 60 hours of work you have to do a week, but in that time you will be able to schedule some opportunities to get involved in clubs or to volunteer or to play sports or whatever it is that keeps you engaged and stimulated. And so the best thing you can do is plan out in advance. So a lot of clubs will tell you, well, we meet Mondays from 6 to 8 p.m. or we meet only on weekends, and they'll tell you that in advance, so you never have to worry. And you use that, check your class calendar and just see if you can squeeze it in, and then also make time to plan your homework. Because if you just say, I'm going to do my homework the next day, oftentimes the next day rolls around and you're like, okay, well, I'll do it the next day. And so you have to really plan it all out in advance. And I would say at least a week in advance, if not 5 days prior. And just that way, like when you go and you start your day and after you've had your 5 to 6 hours of class, you're pretty exhausted. If you know what you're going to do next, I guarantee you'll feel less guilty if you know you planned it in advance. As well, I also think there's some value in just the fact that, if you know you have, a club in the evening or a sports team in the evening, you get your homework done beforehand because, you don't want to keep the rest of your club waiting. And so I think it's a little extra motivation and also something to look forward to. So if you get your homework done first, you'll have something to enjoy after. So there is time. You just have to make the effort to plan it out in advance, and, you'll reap the rewards later, I promise.
Great. And Ali, what do you have kind of to offer in terms of strategies for students coming from UTAT?
Yeah, so I guess if you look at it from a perspective of taking time away from courses to put on a team, let's use design teams for an example, then I would say for most there may be an unavoidable trade-off between grades and design team work, but there are benefits to design teams or extracurriculars in general in the long term that will definitely outweigh that. For example, employers don't look only at grades, but they also look at your extracurriculars a lot. So I would advise you to consider what you're trying to get out of your degree and what your goals are afterwards, and tune your time commitment to everything with respect to those goals. So if you want, let's say, to get involved on interesting projects because that would propel your career, then you might spend more time on design teams and risk lower marks if that's a worry. Now, with respect to design teams specifically, I would say that you get a lot more if you put in more time, as opposed to working on a small bit of it here and a small bit of it there, because you engage much more deeply with the project and will have a chance to work on more aspects of it and change the direction the project heads.
Great, thanks, Ali. So a couple of different perspectives, kind of thinking about kind of planning ahead. So from Mariana, planning ahead on a weekly basis to make sure that you have enough time in your schedule, and Ali thinking about planning ahead about kind of what do you want to get out of the experience in the long run, and Mariana also mentioning that as well. So important reflection process to do as you're thinking about getting involved in clubs, but encouraging message there that you will have time. All right, so at ILead, we talk about leadership a lot, and we sometimes think, in the majority of the world, people think of leadership as when you are holding a position of power. However, at ILead, we believe that leadership is kind of for everybody, and everybody can exhibit kind of good leadership behaviors and be leaderly. And it's really about utilizing your strengths and collaborating with others to kind of have a positive impact and create positive change. So maybe we can get some answers from our panelists about what does leadership really mean to you, kind of through the lens of your participation in a club. And we'll start off with Peter.
Thanks. And kind of touching off of what Jordan said about leadership, not necessarily being a position of power. And this is something I think many people, including myself, kind of idealize leadership as coming into school or starting your first job, is that it's something that you ultimately have or don't have. And I think something I've learned not only through my club, but also through the experiences I've had with mentors and my friends is leadership. There's looking at leadership not necessarily as a nameplate, but more as a skill, and a skill that gets developed over time and through your experiences. And I say that because, especially in my first experiences within my team, I figured that if I didn't have the leadership capability now to contribute to projects, then I just could never do it ever within my time there. And something I learned through projects, and most importantly through perseverance, is that leadership is not something that happens overnight. Leadership is an iterative process, and is a project that you work on yourself through your entire life. There's a really good quote by a previous fellowship member that goes along the lines of, you yourself are an 80-year-long project. And I like to think of it that way because leadership is something that always gets built upon. It's always something that gets developed. And so I encourage you to, especially in your first couple of months, exploring different clubs, exploring different things, to not go so hard on yourself to not have all the answers right away of what club you want to join, or not have a thorough decision on what type of program you want to do, if it's chemical or electrical, but more so to kind of let your experiences guide you in terms of what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. And when you get into the club space, I encourage you to try a bunch of different things and talk to a bunch of different people and kind of let those things guide you necessarily on what you want to achieve with your time at university.
Great, thanks, Peter. Let's hear from Hanna next on this one.
I really like to emphasize the, I really like to emphasize both of those points, that leadership is definitely something that you can learn, and it's not something that you just innately have or don't. My viewpoint of leadership is a little different, where that I see it as more a way to connect people. So as a leader, you're looking at like key connections and, ways to leverage the people you have. I like to think about like the metaphor of emergence, where like each of the people in your organization kind of on their own, they're great. But then when you put them all together and you get them working together efficiently, well, and they're having fun and you have a good energy, then you can like do really amazing things. And for me, leadership is building that structure or that matrix that all of those individuals fit within, and then just having an awareness of everyone's like strengths, discipline, their strengths and their goals and what they want to achieve with the team, and being able to leverage that and oversee those connections. Basically, I think the connection is the most important part between everyone. But yeah, that's kind of how I see it. And it takes a lot of experimentation too. It's not like I have this intuition, I know how to like make everyone work very well together and then this will work. It's like you try some things. It's trial and error, a lot of things too.
Nice, great. I think a key message coming out there from both Peter and Hanna is that it takes time and it takes experimentation. It's a lifelong process. And also kind of it's about understanding yourself and working on yourself. And it's also about understanding others and how others interact. So some really great points there from Peter and Hanna. Okay, so we're going to get on to a question about what is your favorite memory from your student group and why. So I just want to hear some kind of fun stories and get our participants pumped about getting involved in clubs. So we'll start off with Natalie.
Okay, so the favorite memory that I've decided to talk about happened last year for the first time, actually. It was called Student Leaders Summit. And it was a retreat for all of the chapter members of Engineers Without Borders. And we went to Camp Pinecrest, which is, I think it's in Ontario. It's somewhere in Ontario. And we got to do like a weekend of like learning and bonding and having fun in the snow because it happened in January. And I know like it's hard to talk about this, and also I recognize that just in the current context, something like that might not happen as easily. But I think we learned so much from that experience in terms of how to facilitate bonding between members of our community that we're going to be translating to the virtual setting as well. And so I'm really excited to see like what that's going to look like online versus in the context of being all together, in person.
Great, thanks for that story, Natalie. Mariana.
One of my favorite memories in school as a whole is back when I was in NSOC as a first year chair, back in my first year. And every year, the first year class has to put together a prank. So we're in engineering school, we like to build things, we like to design things. And so we also like to prank with the way we build stuff. And we ended up building a giant hard hat and placing it outside one of the buildings. So everyone saw it for a few days. And also a bunch of other little pranks, inside jokes for different classes like NSci versus Core 8. So every group got together and did their own little thing and scattered it everywhere. And I think one of the best parts was what came out of that was that I met all these people in different programs in first year that I had never spoken to, had never really interacted with because we had no classes together. And now during COVID and everything, like when we have calls and whatnot, I feel like it's easier for me to make new friends now just because that whole session catalyzed that, and I felt much more comfortable. And also that's also what encouraged me to keep going and end up on the board of directors of NSLOC, which is our big governance board. So it was a great way to just, again, meet people and, realize that, we're not so different after all. And I know that there will be opportunities to do that both in person and online this year. So I'm really excited for that because I want to give you all that same experience. And I think it'll be even better than before because now we're really thinking creatively about how to make that happen. So that was probably my favorite memory thus far.
Great. Sounds like a lot of fun. Peter.
So this was a memory I had within my club last year when we were at our competition in California. So for those of you who don't know, the West Coast generally does rain quite a bit, especially in the summer. It is quite wet in the summer months. So we actually camp at our competition. There's a campgrounds where we sleep in tents, and like I just said, it rains a lot. So it just so happened that it was pouring rain one of the nights that we were there, and we eat in the campgrounds. So our tent pretty much got flooded, and our food got flooded, and a group of 10 of us ended up sleeping within a Ford Transit van in the back of one of those big vans that you can stand up inside. And this all happened around like 3-4 a.m. in the morning, and really, really tough experience, especially trying to fit that many people in sleeping bags in like a 6-foot bed of a truck. But I think what I really kind of appreciated from that moment was, this isn't a design moment. This isn't the moment of working with our car and our system, but it kind of really showed me the power, or really opened me to the idea of university as an experience to kind of meet people and learn about people through unconventional means. And all of us being outside of our comfort zone, never being in a situation like this before, I got to know a lot of my teammates and ultimately who became my friends through that experience, way more than through any other type of conventional means. So I think what I kind of take from that was cherishing kind of the unconventional moments within school clubs and school experiences, and kind of using those experiences to kind of shape and craft who you are.
Great set of stories there. I got nothing else to add to that. So I'll move on to the next and our final question before we move on to questions from participants. So you're all part of the Summer Fellowship Program. So maybe you can just share a little bit more about how the program is impacting your club and the experience of kind of the execs and members of your club. So people on the call today can understand a little bit about how kind of clubs can improve and the impact of some of ILead's programs. So we'll start off with Ali.
And one of the largest impacts is the looking at the psychological sides of leadership and team culture. This is something that's not really focused on if you leave a design team to focus only on their design, and it's something that's very critical for a design team's success. So ILead has really helped to promote that for many of our leads, and that can help our team become more balanced, and through that become a more effective team and perform better.
Great, thanks, Ali. Hanna.
I was going to say that I think that it's helped a lot in being able to evaluate where your club is at right now and kind of the culture, what actions, and evaluating the actions you could take, because there are some things that you just think of like, oh, we can do this action, that action to address the problems you're having, or maybe some things that you want to change, but really thinking carefully about what exactly you're doing and what you're hitting at, and being able to evaluate the effect of it, I think has been like really helpful from ILead, because Frashik has been through a lot of changes in the past summer very rapidly. So on the side, also trying to implement some changes has been a little hectic, but I think I'm seeing positive results from like my exec team and my subcom. So I think that's how I've benefited.
Great. And Mariana.
For me, I've loved the field program because I'm part of a group where like I'm working with my subcommittee this year, the academic advocacy committee. So I'm the only one really in charge. And so I don't have an exact team that I can bounce ideas off of. So I've loved this program just because I can go, and every week there's usually some about like, half an hour to an hour to just discuss with like small in-person groups. And so I can bounce ideas and get feedback from people who are, also in undergrad and maybe not even involved in NSHOC in any capacity. Like one of my partners is actually in Rotman Commerce. And so he doesn't know anything about what NSHOC does. And so I have to explain it from like a very general perspective. And then I can get ideas that I would have never thought of because I'm only ever speaking to engineers. And so I really love that aspect of collaboration and that we're all helping each other with our own change projects. And then we get to group back together as a whole group, and then I get to hear what other groups have been talking about. So I can even get ideas from at least like 20 people. And I love that aspect of it because I would have never had that otherwise through NSHOC on a whole.
Great. Great. Thanks for those answers. I think kind of one of the threads I can pull out of that is kind of ILead programs allow a space kind of to step back and look at things kind of differently than you might normally would have, and kind of look at them differently, maybe through some new kind of concepts, like kind of the psychological side of leadership, maybe through kind of decision making or different kind of frameworks about different actions that you could take, and also kind of reflecting and stepping back and hearing from other people, and getting those perspectives from other club leaders on how you can address some of the challenges in the club. So that's really what ILead is about, kind of providing a space to kind of look at things differently, think about leadership and challenges and club involvement in a way that you might not have had the opportunity to before, to really improve the experience for everybody involved. So yeah, thanks so much for those answers from our panelists. And now Albert's going to pull out some of the questions that we've gotten in the chat here.
Great, thanks. Thanks again for everybody for answering these questions and kind of giving such great insights. We've gotten some really great questions from the chat as well, so we're going to jump into some of these. A few of these questions will retread some territory that we visited, but we'll try and take a different spin on things just to make sure that we've got some good perspectives from our panelists. If you are keen to answer, just unmute yourself, and that'll be a good signal for me to spotlight you. All right. So I know this was an early question that we had talked about, kind of the balance between academics and kind of extracurriculars. And we kind of touch a little bit on this idea of like how much time it takes. But, you know, one of the questions here, specifically from Oase and kind of bumped up by Aditya, was I heard maintaining a GPA at U of T is extremely tough. So how do you engage with clubs and not let it affect your grades? And perhaps if I wanted to maybe add a bit of dimension to that question, you know, I'd love to hear from the panelists, maybe some of the kind of social or like academic benefits of being in the club. Like, what are some of the kind of energizing components that help you do better in school just by a function of being a part of the club, aside from just managing your time so that you can balance both? So somebody want to jump in on that? Looks like Mariana, and take first stab.
Sure. So it's one thing, it's great to be part of a club because you can learn a new skill or learn more about an organization or a topic you didn't know about. But also we'll get back to this whole meeting people thing. It's also very social, but it also helps, I think it's helped academically. So at least for me, I'm in NSI, it's a very big class. And first year, it's impossible to meet everybody like within the first year. But meeting people through NSOC, I got to know NSI students. And you know, when it came time to preparing for projects and quizzes and exams, I already knew them on a more social level. And I said, hey, like, do you want to come have a study group with me? A lot of my friends were commuter students, so those people we end up talking, you know, over Zoom and over Facebook. And you can absolutely find ways to connect with people both beyond the club itself and also through academics. And I think it really helps, again, when you have a support network. At U of T Engineering, it's all about helping each other out. One of the biggest misconceptions is that we're this cutthroat program and everybody's clawing our way to the top. You know, we abolished a ranking system a few years ago because it wasn't healthy and it wasn't helping anybody. And I think the outcome of that is that everybody feels comfortable with their own progress and their own work. And as long as you're working towards your personal best, I think that it's really easy to do well as long as you collaborate with others and you know your strengths and you know your limits and you look for opportunities to further enrich your studies, which can come from clubs and also through office hours and through study groups. And all of your discipline clubs, which are clubs that each of your disciplines like NSci, chemical, mech, they'll have opportunities to do this more organically as well. So if you're worried about, you know, if you don't join a club and don't have this opportunity, there'll be ways to get involved and meet people through that avenue as well.
Great, thanks for that. Does anybody else just have a super quick add-on to that? If not, we can move on to another question. Peter, looks like you've got again, quick comment.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to add quickly that I think one of the benefits of joining, or I guess, one of the benefits of a club in terms of, you know, helping you out with your academics is the fact that you're pretty much forced to engage with older students. You know, most clubs have, you know, third, fourth year students, master students all older than you who have gone through those experiences of, you know, doing those midterms, you know, finishing those projects. They've all done the same things that you're going to be doing in the next couple of years of your university life. So, you know, by kind of getting that interaction, getting that space to those people, you to kind of learn from them and get their guidance and mentorship.
All right, I think we caught most of that. Unfortunately, Peter, there's a little bit of audio distortion there, but I think we caught the main message there. So thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. Great. So, I think a lot of people now hearing, okay, here's all the benefits of clubs. Amazing way to kind of build some technical skills or to kind of make some social networks or to practice your leadership and develop it in a fun, organic way. I think a lot of people are kind of concerned as first year students how they even get involved with clubs. So we've got a few different questions around this theme. So we'll kind of address them one at a time here. Maybe we'll start with just how, when, and how do people start actually getting involved with clubs? So I know this question specifically from Mohammed is specifically for NSOC, but it said, when do you first year start signing up for clubs or NSOC positions? So perhaps just a super quick thought from anybody on that. Yeah, Ali?
Yeah, speaking about design team perspective, you can get involved right at the start of your university courses because our projects kind of run over the summer and run over the years. So there's no real start and end date to the projects in terms of linking that to an academic year. So you can start whenever, including now. That's what I would add for starting involvement with design.
Great. And perhaps Mariana, do you want to just quickly comment on from an NSOC standpoint from some of the more elected positions, what the timeline looks like?
Absolutely. So if you're a first year, most of our positions are elected and that happens in September. So just check your inboxes, and come September, you'll get information on how to run, how to campaign, make it all very virtual friendly. And then again, I said before, every student is actually part of NSOC, so you can come out to all the events. You don't have to have any position, and it's open to everybody.
Great. Okay, so as a follow-up, so this is another question coming from Alam. And so this question specifically was about design teams, but I think it can really extrapolate out to any group. So if you're getting into a club in first or second year, how do you actually contribute if you don't have the tools of an engineer or the knowledge of senior students kind of supporting you? What value can you actually add as a first year student, and how does that actually look like? So maybe we'll throw that even to Peter to start, and then maybe if somebody else wants to also comment on what first years could do in their clubs.
Cool. I'm hoping you can hear me, and there's no delay. But I love the question because I think a lot of people, including myself, pose this question kind of coming into school, especially seeing a lot of the projects that some of these design teams are working on. If UTAT's literally putting rockets into space, that's a crazy thing to kind of conceptualize as a first year student and thinking, how do I involve myself in this, or how do I meaningfully contribute? And I think something encouraging and to know, to understand, is that all of those students also on the team were also first year students and didn't come into the program as some genius or knew all these topics off the bat. They too also learned those concepts over time and through the program. And I think something worthy to note is that many design teams, help first year students engage themselves in projects and learn about these concepts over time. And so, through your tenure with the club, you start to learn more about these things. It's not just something that happens overnight. So I think one thing to kind of take from that is don't be afraid to ask questions or kind of involve yourself in these things, even if they seem so, grand and so out of reach. If you find something that interests you, no student here is not going to answer a question that you have, no matter how, simple it might sound. So if you're in a team or you're in a design club or even a student club for that matter, don't be afraid to ask questions and start to build meaning from those things.
Great. Does somebody else want to jump in and maybe just with some specific examples of how first year students add value or can contribute to clubs? Maybe another design team perspective, Ali, we'll throw it back to you for UTAT's take.
Yeah, sure. So obviously the projects have sort of different areas of complexity. So as a first year, you may not necessarily have the experience to work on very complex projects, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't push you towards that and teach you. So for example, some of the newcomers to our team are currently working on a heating box, sort of like a mini HVAC system for our test stand to keep our fluids and oxidizers at the right temperature for a test. And that's something that doesn't have sort of the complexity that you would need from your higher year courses, but it's something that you can learn with on the team and sort of develop the practical sides of your experience on the team.
Great. And again, maybe somebody from a non-design team perspective, just a quick example of how first years actually participate in an organization like yours or in any organization. Natalie.
Okay. So I was hesitating to answer because it's very specific at Engineers Without Borders, but I think some other clubs have this structure as well where there's different projects that you can work on. So for us, first years usually come in to join one of those projects, and actually they have the ability to apply for specific positions within those projects. So that could look like a technical lead, it could look like a social impact lead, it could look like someone who's doing marketing. And then they're guided by the like member of the executive team who's actually overseeing that project. So right off the bat, you can come in and not just like engage as someone who's like showing up occasionally or like, you know, coming to test it out. You can actually come in and get a specific role. So you have to be, so there's like accountability and you become more engaged in the project that way. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities. And I think for most clubs, they have different levels in terms of like what kind of background knowledge you'll need for each position. And so as you gain more experience with the club, you can move up to get more responsibility.
Awesome, thanks for that. I mean, it really sounds like in general, you know, that journey of learning about how to function well in a student club or organization mirrors that leadership journey that we heard a lot of people talking about, that, you know, it's not overnight that you become an amazing, you know, club member or technical lead or leader in general. It's that over time you learn from, you know, the people around you and from your environment, and that clubs are a great way to do that. So certainly even with no experience, it looks like there's tons of ways for people to get involved meaningfully straight out of first year. So that being said, you know, obviously, you know, having to learn a lot of those things and commit that time can again require some energy and require some you know, kind of resource. So a couple more questions that have come up around this, and I'm going to clump them together. So Adam has asked kind of what is the average time commitment for a design team or a club, or just a club in general? And Tharaka is also asking, how many clubs can we get involved with without being overwhelmed? Now, I know that these are obviously questions that there are no clean answers to, but perhaps if somebody just wants to give insight on how you kind of were able to navigate, well, how many things should I be involved with, and how did I figure out what my limits were, and what was a good point to kind of balance myself? Hanna?
I just wanted to start this one out. You might be mad at my answer for this because it's like kind of vague, but you need to evaluate like what matters to you personally and what you want to get out of your university experience. This is something I say a lot, but it's very true, like that I've realized throughout the many years that I've been. Sometimes it's academics you care about. Sometimes it's experience in industry, which a lot of the clubs, the design teams kind of like bring you towards. Sometimes it's like maybe you want to work, you really want to get your hands dirty with a specific thing. So I think you need to evaluate, like look deep within yourself, figure out what matters to you, and then you can prioritize your life as necessary. And then making sure that those align with reality in terms of like, and you figure out like the reality mapping as you get some experience. So you dip your toe in and be like, okay, if I spend this much time on studying, I can, you know, get this output. And then if I want to commit to this design team, I realize like, oh, I need to spend more time coming out and more time on my own to absorb information. So you kind of dip your toes into like getting a sense of how much time things take. And then based on your priorities, you can map out how you structure your day. That being said, it's not that easy. It takes many years of iteration, and those priorities and values might change over time, and that's totally fine and normal. But I just say like be in tune with what matters to you rather than what you think should matter based on what other people are doing, if that makes sense.
I think that's a beautifully put answer, and I see a lot of nodding heads from the rest of the panelists there. So, you know, one of the aspects of leadership that we talk a lot about at ILead is self-awareness. So, you know, as individual people, we all have our own sets of values and priorities and strengths. And so what might be okay for one person may be totally different for somebody else. And even kind of what kind of will draw your interest in the things that will energize you, the types of clubs or organizations that are good for you might be totally different than somebody else. And kind of going through your university experience, it's so important to just kind of keep reflecting on and thinking about, well, I tried this little experiment, is it working for me? Did I like it? What did I like about it? What did I not like about it? And kind of learning from there and continuing to iterate, right? So beautiful message again there from Hanna. Unfortunately, I know that's not the clean cut number answer that some of you might have been looking for, but hopefully that does give you a bit of room to experiment and play when you get into the club space here. All right. So now let's imagine, some of these people on our call today are super excited about being part of clubs, and they're thinking ahead. They're thinking ahead to the future. Oh, great! These wonderful panelists, they're setting such a great example. I want to be one of them one day. So we had a question here from Wei Han, asking, how did you come to actually become in the position that you are in right now for your club? So obviously you're all executives for your respective organizations. How did you come to decide and then ultimately move into these roles? So maybe if one or two people want to speak to that. Ellie?
Yeah, from a UTAD perspective, to get sort of more involved in the team requires knowing more about the projects. Because a large aspect of our work is the project itself. So if you want to sort of gain more leadership and gain more responsibilities, you would have to first become familiar with the project, and that requires putting in the time to look at all of the aspects of the project. So that's kind of the path I took, was over the years gaining more experience and gaining more and more leadership responsibilities. On UTAD, I will say there is kind of two sides of leadership perspectives. There's a technical side with leading a subsystem or a chief engineer role, and then there's also a kind of more leadership side, like a director role or working in an executive role. And for me, once I sort of involved in those the technical leadership roles, I realized that I want to gain experience on the sort of executive side, and the side where it's not just technical, but there's also other elements like team culture and external relations that have to be dealt with. So that's kind of how I moved into the role I have now.
That's great. Somebody else want to just make a quick comment on how you found yourself to be in the role that you are in, or how you chose to be where you are now?
I can just kind of add into just being also on a design team. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I think for most design teams, your role is kind of a function of what you put into it, and that kind of comes with like the hours and the types of commitments you can make. So for me, it was really the fact that I think I was putting a real effort to contributing, especially in heavy times. So the school year does get quite a little more hectic in the winter semesters. So I try to put my best foot forward, especially during that time, because you'll see, some people can't make the same commitments in the winter as they would in the fall. So I made a real effort to actually, contribute to more fabrication periods, more team meetings, and also just being curious and asking questions during those times. And I think my team was able to, I guess, recognize that type of initiative I was putting forth, especially when they needed it. And as a result, I was able to get more responsibilities over time.
Great. I know Mariana, you had a really quick thing maybe that you wanted to. I don't know. You're good. Okay, great. So we're gonna move into one kind of final cluster, I think, of audience questions here, and this is kind of referring to our current state of virtual engagement, right? So I'm gonna kind of cluster these questions together, but from Kenny, Howlin, and Faye. People are asking, what is Frosh Week going to look like this year with kind of the situation that we're in? What do design teams and clubs look like this year? And are there going to be any in-person elements on any of these things? Now, obviously, just as a preface, a lot of things globally are still kind of being mapped out and worked out. So, some of these answers are subject to change, but to the best of your knowledge, what does everything look like this fall? Hanna, it looked like you were excited to start off maybe with Frosh Week, and then whoever else wants to talk about their clubs can go ahead as well.
I'm so glad you asked. I could talk about this all day, but to make it short, it's gonna be a really good time. I know that, it's not what we've run before, it's completely new, but in some ways it's like even better because there's so many more chances to make friends and make like deeper connections with each other. a lot of the events that you would have had in person are being revamped, and in some ways are better than they would have been in person. You don't need to walk around when it's hot and then like almost get heat exhaustion, so that's a plus. But yeah, and then for opportunities for in-person meetups, there is a section of Frosh Week that is dedicated to local meetups across the world in a safe, socially distant manner, adhering to the rules of that area, and you should get notifications of it then. And then, but there is like Frosh Week events running 24/7 to accommodate for different time zones online, and I promise you, it's amazing. Check it out on the website. But yeah, that's for Frosh Week on that end. Oh yeah, the website will also be in the follow-up email Teresa will send to you after this. So if you want to check it out there too.
Also just did a quick post there in the chat. Somebody else want to comment quickly about what the fall might look like for your club or organization? All right, we've got Ali coming up here.
Yeah, just a point to add on in-person events. For our club, UTAD, we will be doing some in-person work sessions. As much as technology has improved, you can't tighten nuts and bolts over Zoom yet. So we kind of need those in-person sessions to advance the project, and they will happen. Of course, following some more strict measures on social distancing and the safety we have to follow. And it's all also dependent on cooperating with the university on the spaces they open, but it is an element we want to keep.
Great. And maybe just one more person might want to comment on what the virtual experience will be like for clubs and organizations in the fall. Oh, Peter jumping in again here.
Sure, I just want to say that so one of the benefits I think of the timing that UTSM chose for our projects is that our 2-year cycle project, the Urban Concept Vehicle I kind of described earlier, is still mainly online because we are at a position of where it's primarily research and design. There's less of a focus on necessarily like physical presencing in this project. So one of the nice things is that we can still collaborate, make meaningful collaboration online, despite kind of the circumstances that we're in. So, and we're actually, inviting students right now to actually join us within that project. We have positions for anybody of really any sort of experience or year. And that project is probably going to be online for the entire year. So it's something, we don't know necessarily right now what the status of the winter semester is yet, but we're pretty confident that that's a project that can be sustainable throughout the entire year online.
Awesome, thank you for that. And so hopefully for those of us listening in the audience, that gives you a bit of a sense of what you might anticipate, but feel free to keep up to date with the respective clubs, social medias, and websites, some of which will be sent in a follow-up email. So you'll kind of find out lots of ways to get involved with these 5 organizations, but also the over 100 other engineering student organizations, plus the several hundred other U of T-wide organizations that exist on campus. With that, I think we are coming to an end. So I'm just going to pass it back to Teresa or to Jordan, one of the two. Teresa, for some final words from the team.
You want to throw up the slides, Albert? Oh, great. You're headed. So I just want to give a big thank you to our panelists, and well, thank you to everyone for attending today. I think our panelists provide some great insights into student groups and organizations at U of T and really how to get involved to make the most of your experience. So let's give a nice virtual clap to our panelists and our moderator, Jordan. So thank you so much. This is our last event for the University of Toronto Engineering Academy. And there are a number of ways to get involved with ILead and student groups here at U of T. So we're just going to quickly go through them. So first, you can stay connected to ILead through our newsletter at that link right there, ilead.engineering.utoronto.ca. And Albert will throw that in the chat. And you can follow us on our social media channels. So we have Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This is a great way to stay up to date in terms of what's happening, as we will have a number of events in the fall semester for the incoming first year class. And I'll pass it over to Jordan to go over the last couple slides.
So one of the questions that came up during the panel was, how do you explore what possibilities exist? And the official resource for that is skule.ca. /affiliated_clubs. So this is run by the Vice President of Student Life in NSOC, which ILead often collaborates with. So if you go there, you can see all the list of official clubs that are affiliated with engineering and the Engineering Society. You can also check them out at skule.ca in general, and on Facebook. There's a school Facebook group that includes a lot of really good information about clubs and what's going on in the school community. Also, as part of orientation week, there's also a clubs fair. And so this will be running online this year on Discord. It's on September 9th from 1 to 4 p.m. And this will be a great opportunity to jump in and out of conversations and video chat rooms of all the different clubs that will be represented during the clubs fair. And so great opportunity to kind of hear the pitch, sign up for newsletters, and talk to different representatives of all the clubs in engineering. A really great way to kind of spend a couple hours and really peruse and dig deep into the different clubs that exist. And then one offering that ILead is going to be delivering in September, probably the third week of September, after Clubs Fair. It's often a bit overwhelming. You just literally 100 clubs. And our panelists today pointed out the importance of kind of reflection and thinking about what it is that's really important to you and what you want. And so ILead runs a workshop called Chart Your Future Clubs, where we provide a space to reflect on what it is that you really want. We also kind of provide some more information about how clubs can benefit you in your professional development and how employers look at club involvement. And we'll give you a space there to kind of reflect, some prompts to walk you through that, some ability to connect with some of your peers and hear about some of their decisions and experiences, as well as kind of a quieter, more calm space to peruse the entire club's list so that you can make some informed decisions about how you want to get involved. And so you can look forward to that offering coming up after the clubs fair as well. So once again, we'd like to thank you all for participating. We'd like to thank our panelists, also Teresa and Albert, and we'll allow the panelists now to post any extra kind of links within the chat to any specific activities or events coming up for their clubs. And we'll also be sticking around after the event to allow you a chance to ask any final remaining questions that you have. So thanks very much for everybody for being a part of this great event.
Thanks, everybody.